Whether you're just getting into woodworking or you've been doing it for a long time, there's always more to learn. So that's why I've brought together my favorite 10 hacks that I've learned over the years that I use every single day. And the best part is they're super simple and easy to understand. And even if you think you know them all, I bet there's one in there that you don't. So stick around to the end. So for this first hack, we're coming over to the table saw and we need to joint this edge. Jointing means to flatten it so that it's a perfectly straight, flat edge. But we need a reference. And this obviously is not straight, so we don't want to put this on the fence and make a cut because it's all wobbly and not safe. And it won't give us a straight, nice cut. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn our table saw into a jointer. Most people, such as myself, don't have a jointer because they're super expensive and really not that practical. They only do one thing, which is make a straight edge. So all you need is a scrap piece of plywood. I'm using melamine, but plywood works just fine. And so all you need to do is cut this to the length that's a little bit longer, about as long as your table saw, but longer than your fence. And then you're gonna need 2 clamps as well. So let me show you how this is done. Now I'm gonna cut this so that it's a little bit longer than the fence. So you've got your piece, it's cut a few inches wide and a little bit longer than your fence. So now all you're gonna need to do is make one more cut with the table saw and then clamp it on and it's good to go. So what you're gonna wanna do is pull this piece back, move the fence over so that this piece sits flush with the edge of the blade. And now we're gonna cut it, but we're gonna stop once we get to right about here. We're gonna stop it before we cut all the way. Lift this piece off, flip it around, and now we can set it. So I didn't cut it quite far enough. You want it to sit about even on both sides because we're gonna need to clamp it down. That's about good. Now, slide this back in, slide it down to there, and that's perfect. So we just wanna make sure it's not going anywhere. So this is gonna act like a guide on its way out, and it'll remove the blades with the material and then feed it out in a straight line. So I'll show you how it works. And just like that, we have a perfectly flat edge. I should also mention tip number 1 is the most complicated tip. They only get easier. Sticking with the theme of table saw brings me to tip number 2, the rabbet joint tip. So this one's pretty common when you make a rabbet joint, not to be confused with the dado joint where it sits in the middle. A rabbet joint is just on the edge of a piece where we cut out a notch that this piece would then fit into. It's used commonly on shelves and stuff like that. So, in order to do this, some people, mostly beginners I feel like, would come over to the blade, lower the blade to where it's a little bit skinnier than the piece that they're gonna do, about maybe halfway if they want it to sit halfway in. And then what they'll do, and there's nothing wrong with this, it works, but they'll adjust the thing and then they'll cut it, and then they'll move it over, and then they'll cut it, and then they'll move it over, and then they'll cut it, etc. But what makes this a lot easier, and you don't even need a tape measure to do it, you take the piece that's going to be sitting inside of the joint, you line it up with the edge that's going to be cut out, and then with it up against the fence, you just move the fence over until the edge of the blade lines up with the inside edge of this piece right here. And I'm just looking directly down the top of this piece, making sure it's all lined up. And I'll put the stop down, take this piece away, and we can go ahead and make this cut. All you have to do is raise the blade up to where it sits just right at that line. Fence over just enough. So as you can see, it's gonna cut that chunk out nicely. So now we have our beautiful rabbet joint. Next hack. So this hack is definitely one of my favorites. All it uses is a drill, and it's really about the drill bit. So I use this Milwaukee magnet drill bit because it's super nice to have a magnetic tip that picks up and holds onto the screws. But when I don't use a magnetic tip, it's frustrating, and I wish that all tips were magnetized. So you can make that happen, and all you need is a magnet. The stronger the magnet, the better this will work. So first you find a drill bit that's not magnetized. Like this one that came with this box of screws I bought. This screw bit, I'm not gonna put it in my drill because it'll get stuck. The idea is the same. So we have a screw right here. Obviously, it doesn't pick it up. There's no magnetic force on it. So we just take our magnet and we're just gonna strike it. Just gonna scratch the magnet over and over, just hitting this bit into it. You do that for a bit, and then it's not super strong because I only did a little bit, but the more you do it, the stronger it'll get. So this next hack is a 2-in-1, and it's basically you spill a box of screws. I have a brand new box of screws here, and I have a giant pile of sawdust. And this feels incredibly wrong, but I'm doing it for you guys to show you how this is done. So say you accidentally dump your entire new box of screws into these wood chips. And this is horrible. That felt terrible. But luckily, I have a magnet. So instead of grabbing a handful of sawdust and screws, I just take my magnet and I just pick them up. Take them out, put them in the box, just slide them off into the box. Of course, there will still be a little bit of sawdust, but it's not going to be nearly as much as trying to pick these out, and it won't take as long either. Oh, I actually literally just figured out, if you pick them up and there's a bunch of sawdust in between them, the best way to do it is to then grab all of it off into your hand and then hold your hand out and wave the magnet above, and it'll take just the screws out of the sawdust. So that's the best way to do it right there. We're all learning together. All right, next hack. So this next hack is for any piece with like holes or imperfections in it that most people would tell you to go buy an expensive wood filler for, which does do a nice job, but if you're like me and you like to save money or even don't have any, also like me, then you just fill these with your own wood filler that you make for free. So I'm gonna show you how to do that right now. And all you need is a piece of sandpaper, even the scrappier already used sandpaper, the better, and some glue. To do, if this was a finished piece, I would grab one similar to it, like an offcut, and sand off of that. But since this is just a random scrap piece, I'm just gonna sand on this. So you're just gonna sand it in one spot until you build up a nice little pile of sawdust. Like that. Then you're gonna slide it all together into a little pile. And then you're gonna take your wood glue. You're gonna squeeze, oh, my wood glue's all clogged up. So now take your wood glue, squeeze out a little bit, about the same size as your pile. And then you're just gonna use your finger, or you can use a stick or something if you want, but I just use my finger. Just gonna roll it around and mix it together. You're gonna get this goop. And this goop is your wood filler, and it's automatically the same color as your wood because you used your wood for it. So you just slide it, kind of just jam it in, whatever you need to be filled. Get it all over there, push it in, roll the pieces over, and it's almost like little wood boogers. It's like little wood boogers. It's a gross analogy, I'm sorry, but, you know, and then once it's like this, you can just add a little more glue on top, like a little bit, and then just sand right up to it until some sawdust gets on it, and then you can even wipe some more on there, and then you're just gonna kind of rub that around lightly, and then blow it away. Sand it down real light. And now our hole's filled and it looks pretty good. And you can always do it more and more to make it look better and fill it bigger. This next hack is for a miter joint. And it's if you cut the piece too short and you're like, I think this is ruined, but it's not. These 245s and you're setting them on this corner, but you cut this piece just a little bit too short. And you're like, oh no, what am I gonna do? It's not gonna work. Don't worry. Just grab some sandpaper, preferably a sheet of sandpaper, but this is just what I have. Set it on a flat surface and hold it down. Then you're gonna take the inside edge of that piece and sand it down, maintaining a flat. And depending on how short you cut it, you could also trim just the tiniest sliver off on a table saw and it'll do the same effect. But basically all we're doing, since this is the smallest length of the piece and it only gets bigger and bigger, all you're gonna do is remove this and it'll get bigger the farther up you cut it. So then it will make it in turn, so it'll technically make it longer. So then you can make it as long as you need so that this edge lines up with where you need it. And then you can still have a nice clean miter right here. The only thing that this does is it will lower this part a little bit. So your outer width is just gonna be a little bit less and you'll have to adjust this piece accordingly. But that's a really cool one and it's really, really good for like crown molding or base in a house. So that's one that I picked up at the cabinet shop, as well as the magnetizing trick. I think this next hack is my favorite. I've been using it the longest and I use it every day. And this is just a total example. It works in so many different ways. But the basic idea is you have the thickness of this piece and you measure it and you're like, oh no, it's like a 32nd of something and I don't even know how thick. I don't even want to do the math. So instead of freaking out, all you need to do is you take the thickness, whatever the piece is, you line it up to the edge of the piece you're cutting that you need to remove that amount of thickness for. And then you just hold it there and you just measure up to it. And then you get your measurement like that instead. An alternative way to do this is you take it, you look at where it's sitting on the tape measure. So this one's, in between 5/8 and 11/16. And so all you're gonna do is hold the edge of the tape exactly to the thickness so that you have 21/36, I believe, hanging off. And then you can just hold it there and measure over and you'll get the same number. This next hack is one of the first things they taught me at the cabinet shop. And I had already known it, but I didn't really use it because I didn't know why it was so necessary. But it's super essential for finish work. This one uses drill bits. So whether it's a normal piece of wood or especially a piece of melamine, when you drill through it, you can see it's all blown out on the backside. So to prevent that, what we're gonna do is just set it down onto a scrap piece and drill into that instead. And although there's still a tiny little piece missing, that's just because I went aggressive and fast. But you can see the difference there, it's huge. And the same goes for any piece of wood. See, it's all ripped up and torn out there. It's all ripped up. As you can see, there's almost no tear out whatsoever compared to the alternative. All right, we've reached the 10th and final tip. And this one is also super useful that I use all the time. Every time I glue up, I use this one. And although I don't have anything I'm gluing up right now, I can still give you the idea of it with this. So say you're gluing these two edges together right here, and you put glue in there and you squeeze them and a bunch of glue comes out. But you want these pieces to stay flat with each other the whole way. So what you do generally is you take some scrap pieces and you set them on the flat part and you sandwich the pieces together while also clamping this way, so that it squeezes this way and pushes it together and flat. So what this does though, is it gets glue on this. Even if you wipe this clean first, it'll still get a little bit of glue here, and that could possibly rip off part of your project and ruin it. So what you do is you take a piece of parchment paper, or if you don't have that, you can take just some tape, and you put tape in between this and this piece, or parchment paper even works better. And then you use that as a barrier between the glue and the wood. Well, there we have it. My top 10 woodworking tricks that I use every single day. Comment below if you thought of another one, or if you have any suggestions to make any of the ones I shared better. And please subscribe, it would mean the world and I'd appreciate it so much. I'm a small channel just trying to get started and I really appreciate it. See you next time.